On the second day on the conclave, United States Cardinal Robert Prevost has been elected as the new Pontiff of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV. Russian President Vladimir Putin held a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping where they signed several strategic cooperation agreements. And in Venezuela, flight number 20 arrived at the Miami International Airport to bring back home 315 migrants as part of the return to the homeland government's plan. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Leo XIV has been elected as the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church after 2 days of conclave in the Vatican City. He is Cardinal Robert Prevost, born in Chicago, United States, who has become the first Pope of that nationality. Prevost is 69 years old and has spent 40 years as a missionary in Peru, the country where he became a bishop. In his speech from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, Leo XIV mentioned the synodal church, a concept promoted by Francis and very controversial with the more conservative camp.
Dearest brothers and sisters, this is the first greeting of the risen Christ, the Good Shepherd, who gave his life for the flock of God. I too would like this greeting of peace to enter your hearts and reach your families, all peoples, wherever they may be, all nations, the whole earth. Peace be with you.
The new Pope also recalled from the balcony the memory of Pope Francis.
This is the peace of the risen Christ, a disarmed peace and a disarming peace. Humble and persevering, it comes from God, God who loves us all unconditionally. We still keep in our ears that weak but always courageous voice of Pope Francis blessing in Rome. The Pope who blessed in Rome gave his blessing to the world, to the entire world. That Easter morning, let me follow up on that same blessing. God loves us. God loves you all, and evil will not prevail. We are all in the hands of God. Therefore, without fear, united hand in hand with God and among ourselves, let us move forward. We are disciples of Christ. Christ precedes us. The world needs his light. Humanity needs him as the bridge to be reached by God and his love.
A number of tourists from the United States at the Vatican City shared their thoughts on the election of the first American Pope.
Well, I'm just hoping that the new Pope can help steer us in a good direction and run into the politics. You know, right now it's very complicated. So I'm just hoping that he's able to rekindle a good relationship with our president and like all the government officials so that we can start going into a good route, I would say.
I'm just excited to be part of history and have the first American Pope that's also part of history is just very exciting, and we're hopeful for what's to come.
I mean, it's amazing. I think it comes at a really interesting time because, we have all of this kind of political unrest right now with the Trump presidency in the U.S. So and there's these religious kind of undertones with the Christian population in the United States. Trump kind of used that those values as he stood on those values for his election. So it's kind of interesting to see. I'm curious to see how it goes, and how politics in the U.S. is influenced by these kinds of politics here. But
the new Bishop of Rome was born on September 14, 1955. He arrived in Peru in 1985, and since then he focused his work on the communities of that country, with recent emphasis on the community of Chiclayo, which he referred to in his first address as "my beloved diocese." On January 30, 2023, the Pope called him to Rome as prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops and president of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, and promoted him to Archbishop. And now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. In the framework of the 80th anniversary of Victory Day in Russia, President Vladimir Putin held a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, where they signed several strategic cooperation agreements. At the reunion, the Russian head of state assured that Moscow and Beijing remain staunch defenders of the historic truth and remember the countless people their countries lost during World War II, stressing that the sacrifices that both their nations made should never be forgotten. In echoing remarks, Xi highlighted the need for the continuous development of the countries' bilateral relations, as both leaders agreed to deepen the global partnership and strategic cooperation. For this, the foreign ministers of both nations signed a joint declaration on the strengthening cooperation to uphold the authority of international law. On the 80th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazism and fascism, the presidents of Venezuela and Cuba laid wreath at the Simón Bolívar monument in Moscow. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, together with his Cuban counterpart Miguel Díaz-Canel, well received by Venezuelan students at the site, where they placed a wreath at the statue of the liberator Simón Bolívar in the Russian capital. The monument, inaugurated in the year 2023, represents the culmination one of the projects of Commander Rafael Chávez Frías, who in one of his last visits to the country placed the first stone of a project that would seal the alliance of both nations.
The heroic people liberating Europe, liberating the Jewish people, liberated humanity. That is the truth. The triumph belongs to them yesterday, and the triumph belongs to them today. And the triumph will belong to them forever. That is why we have to come.
In Russia, President Vladimir Putin announced a three-day ceasefire on the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War against Nazi Germany. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov assured that this measure will begin on May 8th and will last until May 11th. This decision has a humanitarian character and is aimed at allowing the exchange of prisoners and the evacuation of civilians in conflict zones. Peskov warned that Russia will respond forcefully to any provocation or violation of the ceasefire by the Ukrainian armed forces. The Victory Day is one of the most symbolic events in Russia, where there will be commemorative acts, marches, and as a main tradition, the military parade, where troops and modern war equipment will be exhibited. Palestine, the number of people killed by the attacks of the Israeli occupation reached 52,653, while the number of wounded reached 118,897. In the last 24 hours alone, the Zionist military operations have resulted in the death of 38 Palestinians, injuring another 145. This Wednesday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz announced that his army will expand its military operations in Gaza, forcing the enclave's population to relocate to a confined area in the south. Katz also added that Israeli troops will remain in all areas they capture, indicating that they will not withdraw even if a new ceasefire agreement is reached with Hamas. The United Nations World Food Programme expressed concern over drone attacks on the port of Sudan, making it difficult to distribute food across the country. A military source revealed that on Wednesday, the Sudanese armed forces intervened in a drone attack on the country's largest naval base, Port Sudan, the fourth day of consecutive attacks. Recently, the Sudanese forces have intensified drone attacks on military infrastructure. In this regard, Stephanie Tremblay, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, stated that the Red Sea port is a crucial access for aid, so the constant siege makes the work of humanitarian personnel more difficult. Recently, the Sudan Defense Forces have intensified drone attacks on military and critical infrastructure in areas controlled by the Sudanese armed forces. In the United States, the new Delaney Hall Migrant Detention Center in Newark, New Jersey, has been the target of protest by activists opposed to Donald Trump's immigration policies. Outside the prison, protesters questioned its operation, especially due to the lack of evidence of approval by local authorities. On the other hand, the mayor of Newark, Ras Barak, expressed his concern by pointing out that the jail is operating at the cost of non-compliance with the necessary regulations and licenses. In this context, the local government has issued 3 citations against the prison administration of the facility, including one that denounces the refusal to allow the mayor to enter. Honduras reinforced surveillance in some sectors of the capital after the U.S. Embassy warned of a possible threat of a mass shooting. The U.S. delegation said it had received information about a possible shooting threat in 3 places in Tegucigalpa, among them a school. President Xiomara Castro criticized in a speech this Wednesday the message of the embassy, saying that it generates anxiety, affirming that in Honduras they live in peace. The police in a communique assured that they have received multiple warnings about a possible attack, such as the placement of explosive devices with the purpose of provoking chaos and destabilization, and preventive actions were activated. We have a short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Fun short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. In Venezuela, flight number 20 arrived at Maiquetía International Airport to bring back home 315 migrants as part of the Return to the Homeland governmental plan. The Conviasa airline departed from Mexico to turn back several Venezuelan migrants detained at the Mexican-U.S. border, as well as several relatives of the Venezuelans kidnapped in El Salvador. Over 3,000 nationals have been able to come back home as a result of the governmental plan to rescue them from the U.S. anti-immigration policies. In addition, Maduro's government has been making great efforts to get Venezuelan migrants away from the Salvadoran Secot prison. Likewise, it was advanced the arrival of another flight with Venezuelan migrants on Friday. In Peru, demonstrators take to the streets to protest over the death of Radio La Caribeña journalist at the hands of alleged hitmen in the Amazon city of Iquitos. 70-year-old journalist Raúl Celis Lopez was murdered on his way to work on board of a motorcycle cab at around 5:30 a.m. This is the second murder of a Peruvian journalist so far in 2025, according to the National Association of Journalists. The people of Iquitos mobilized to demand justice for the murder of the journalist who received death threats after denouncing land trafficking in his program. The protest took place at the headquarters of the police and the judiciary in rejection of the growing wave of violence in the city of Loreto. In Ecuador, residents of the native community of Salango demanded justice on Wednesday in the case of the sale of beaches over which they have ancestral rights. The Salango community argues that the Ecuadorian government ignored their community rights by allowing the illegal sale and appropriation of approximately 84 acres of land in 2000 to a real estate company managed by a Swiss national. Community members argue that the sale has restricted their access to the natural resources that have historically sustained their economy and cultural identity. Next May 20th, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights will hold a public hearing to address the case. Mexico City is preparing to welcome more than 5 million visitors for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Soccer's top event will be held in Mexico, the United States and Canada, marking the first time that 3 countries will co-host the event. 3 of the 16 venues will be in the Latin American nation, with the central city of Guadalajara and the Northern Industrial Center of Monterrey sharing hosting duties with Mexico's capital. More than 5 million people are expected to arrive for the games in Mexico City, which has around 9 million residents and is more than 2,200 meters above sea level. Organizers called for a World Cup free of homophobia, racism, and other attacks on civil liberties. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.
There are events that shock the world. Every piece of news becomes a story, and we bring those stories to your screen because the voices of the people are the protagonists. From the South